Dice. Aren't there a lot of them? Dice. These motors of probability. No one knows who invented them, but it was probably the Greeks. When we ask ourselves about most questions like this, it turns out that it's the Greeks who invented this. But that's not important to our current question, because today we'll be looking at motors of probability in terms of music and synthesis. Mozart is credited with a dice game for generative composition, but since we don't like Mozart very much, we're going to ignore that. For the purposes of the EC90 cassette, we will be using a Korg wave state synthesizer, state-of-the-art wave sequencing. Now what wave sequencing is you have lanes of data, parallel lanes of data. These lanes can carry all different types of things: samples, pitches, note length, gate, you name it. You can think of them as like railway lines with different sizes of information that move in parallel. Or you could not think of them like that, because no one can actually explain how wave sequencing works, so we're not going to try. Now, the wave state is built upon an earlier synthesizer that Korg built, the Wave Station from 1990. These machines were very digital, what is now derided as romplers. And what that actually means is that within each one of these machines, you have on their ROM, on their read-only memory, various different synth data, various different samples of instruments. It's like an encyclopedia of useful instruments. But of course, this isn't actually an encyclopedia here. This is The Moths of the British Isles by South, Series 1 and Series 2, published by Warne in Frederick Warne and Co. Limited, London and New York. This is the 1980 edition. The first edition was published in 1908. Now, in the Western canon of music, leading up to its apotheosis in classical music, composition had become something which was fixed or knowable. It was about getting everyone to play the same thing, to play what they were supposed to. It became like a governmental organization where everyone played their fixed role in the music. Because if you imagined it with something as large as an orchestra, if everyone played exactly what they wanted, well, actually that would sound pretty good, wouldn't it? Maybe they should have done that. But returning to our wave state, as you remember, we have these lanes of data, and each stage in these lanes of data, because they're quantized into little packets of data, each one can have a probability value. So say that for each of these packets of data, we had a different sample, say a saxophone, a trumpet, a guitar. We can assign different probabilities. So the trumpet could be 50%, the saxophone could be 90%, and the guitar could be, say, 20%, so you get less guitar. Or you could have, from whatever note you have played, a fifth above, an octave above, a seventh above, and then to each of those you can ascribe a different probability. So if you had more of the tonic note of the scale or the octave, you might end up with something a bit more like a drone, whereas if you ascribe more probability to more exotic variables above and below the notes that you've played, you'll end up with a richer tapestry of music emerging. And of course you can do the same with different types of note, crotchet, minim, or whatever. Each of these you can assign different amounts, so they will play at different rates. So you won't get loops emerging so much as you would with a lot of other electronic music, where you're trying to actually get that strict control over that. what we're trying to do here is to get less control over the music, but not to allow it to turn into total chaos. Dice. Aren't there a lot of them? And since we're talking here about the EC90 series of cassettes, each time we record from the wave state onto one of our cassettes, the music being encoded onto here will be different on this side and on this side. So we'll be getting a unique recording experience available to each of you, because traditionally for recording and reproduction, it's been a matter of making every copy the same. Our idea here is to make every copy different, every copy unique. And this will of course mean that each of these, being an EC90, being an hour and a half, will mean that someone is going to have to mind the machines, whether you regard that as making music or not. It's at least an engineering gig to put the data onto here. So when we consider the economics of it, it's pretty terrible. But dice. Aren't there a lot of them? So thanks for tuning in, and we'll be having more of these interesting informational videos for you soon.